Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Huber Memorial Church. I trust you know Huber is the body and the Life Center is the building. From Sunday to Sunday, we gather to celebrate the life of our risen Lord and Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ. So for the body, for the church, this is our sanctuary. I would ask the men, if you don't mind, please take your cap off. You're welcome to the Life Center, but this is our sanctuary. So out of respect for who we are and where we are, I would ask you to do that. The restrooms are immediately out that door and to the left. If you go to the left and they're overflowing, keep going to the left. If you go to the left and it's overflowing, keep going to the left. We have restrooms all up on the left around this corner. As I mentioned earlier, tonight, you don't have to worry about parking, seating, climbing steps. We got the technology. You really don't have to be concerned about your safety, because I believe tonight this is probably the safest place in Baltimore City. We're grateful that we were chosen to assist with this collaborated effort and partnership, and we're glad that you are here. I always like to invite and invoke the presence of our master. So if you don't mind, we're going to bow together, and then I'm going to introduce our moderator for this evening's gathering. Let's bow. Father, we bow before you. We thank you so much that we can call you Father. We thank you for the way you've provided for us and protected us. We thank you for the way you prepared us for everything that touches our lives in this journey of life. By the power of your Holy Spirit, make this real and right for us as your people. Coordinate everything that takes place for us as your people. May it be for our good and for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Now we're prepared to go forward. Our moderator is none other than the Chief Judge of Baltimore City Courts, Judge Wanda Heard. She will be in charge. She'll be going forth. And I think you know how she can call things into order. If you don't, you will. Judge Heard.
Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening, everyone. I am retired, Judge Heard. So if I was not retired, I would not be free to be here today and to speak my mind. But my job today is to allow you to ask questions of our esteemed panel. So before we go any further, I'd like to give you some rules of the court, so to speak. First and foremost, we want to make sure everyone leaves here safely and can drive. Right now, there is a small silver Ford SUV with its interior lights on. So you might want to go to your car. If your tag is 875 M as in Mary 186, your interior lights are on, which means your battery might have a problem starting up when we get ready to leave. So go check that out. Next, my job is to make sure your questions are heard and answered. And to do that, we only have 2 hours. I need you to write your questions down legibly. There are staff members walking around towards the rear and in the aisles with 3x5 cards. And if you would write your question on that card, they will take it and give it to me. And I will make sure that our panelists get that question. It's important that you know that we got 2 hours. So if you want to ask more than one question, ask for more than one 3x5 card. And it will come up to me and we'll get moving. If you ask a question that's already been asked, in other words, someone else has asked that identical question, I'll make a note that we've asked that question and move on to another issue so we can cover as many subject matters as you wish, so we can get as much information out of our panelists as possible. I'm going to ask that if you have those cards, our staff members, can you raise your hands, wave your arms? Where are you? They're in the back? Are they actually in the lobby area? Okay, they're out, see them out there. So you'll have to go through the door, leave your seat, go out there, get your card, write your question, give it to them, and they'll get it to me. My job also is to let you know who we have today. You may recognize many of the folks that are present, but my job is to make sure that you not only have an opportunity, but maybe you find out a little bit about some folks that you did not know. And I think it's important that you know who they are. Some of them work really hard, and these names you may not have never heard before. Erek Barron is the United States Attorney for the District of Maryland. That's where that... Raise your hand. There he goes. There he goes. Now, Shorty, I need you to behave. Everyone else is going to behave, and everyone's going to make nice, and they're handing you the cards so we can move along because we have a lot of folks that want to ask questions, and I know you have some too, so let's get going. For many people that don't know, Erek Barron is the 49th U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland, and he is the federal chief law enforcement officer, serving over 6 million residents of Maryland and overseeing the investigation and litigation of all criminal and civil cases brought before the United States District Court. His office handles a very high volume of cases. They involve national security, domestic violence, international terrorism, narcotics, organized crime, gang violence, public corruption, cybercrime, financial and health care fraud cases, civil rights, just to name a few. Prior to becoming the U.S. Attorney for Maryland, Mr. Barron was a partner at a law firm in Maryland, a member of the House of Delegates, serving the 24th Legislative District. And in 2015, he and 3 other gentlemen became the first to ever join the women's legislators of the Maryland caucus. Mr. Barron also began his career in the state's attorney's office for Prince George's County, where he served also in the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. That's where I first saw him prosecute cases. And he served as counsel and policy advisor to then Senator Joseph Biden on the United States Senate Judiciary Committee and the Subcommittee on Crime and Drugs. Also, he was nominated by President Biden to serve as our U.S. Attorney. That nomination was unanimously confirmed by the Senate in September of 2021, and he was sworn in as our U.S. Attorney October 7th, 2021. Please, again, let's welcome Maryland's first African-American U.S. Attorney, Mr. Erek Barron. Next, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Anthony, the Honorable Anthony Brown. He is our newly elected Maryland Attorney General. And through the years of public service, Attorney General Anthony Brown has been leading the community in areas of public safety, equity, and justice matters. Most recently, served in the Congress, and he championed their common sense gun safety laws, universal background checks, a ban on bump stocks, and raising the age to purchase assault rifles and red flag laws, which would affect the way in which people can obtain firearms. Anthony worked with the General Assembly and Congress to expand protections for victims' rights, domestic violence, abused, neglected children, veterans involved with mental health issues, behavioral issues, health issues. Those are often not met and need funding, and that was our champion while he was in Congress. Anthony has also advocated for the repeal of the death penalty while serving as Maryland Lieutenant Governor, as well as the decriminalization of marijuana and the expansion of laws which govern record expungements. After the tragic murders at Sandy Hook Elementary School, at that time, he worked for Governor O'Malley, and he moved to adopt stringent background checks and training requirements for all individuals that were purchasing and selling guns, as well as creating a ban for large capacity magazines and certain types of assault rifles. Attorney General Brown has been and will continue to be a champion for our communities. Please, let's welcome our new Maryland Attorney General, Anthony Brown. To my immediate right is Isabel Mercedes Cummings. She is the Inspector General for Baltimore City. She has flourished under the leadership of the Inspector General's office in that her appointment occurred in January 2018. And she has, during that time, has quadrupled the number of hotline complaints responded to and achieving independence for her office in successfully growing the office from 6 to 18 employees. They call it the OIG, that's the initials for the Office of the Inspector General. And it has taken over ethics and whistleblower functions in Baltimore City and has had a number of high-profile cases and matters which enabled the office to achieve $15 million of documented savings or waste for the citizens of Baltimore City. In 2019, she was elected to the Board of Directors of the Association of Inspector Generals, which is a national organization, and she serves as the first vice president and chair of the Finance Committee. For 6 years prior, she was Assistant Inspector General of Investigations for the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, overseeing at that time 200 reports of investigations and 14 employees. Ms. Cummings began her career as an auditor for KPMG Pete Marwick in Baltimore back in 1984. She served 7 years as the Director of Internal Audits for the American National Bank, and she went on to start her legal career in the U.S. Attorney's Office as a law clerk, specializing in investigating white-collar crimes. Then she went on to become a prosecutor in the Maryland State Prosecutor's Office, where she served for 7 years. She is an individual schooled and trained to investigate economic crimes, and she has supervised in the Special Prosecution Unit of the Prince George's County State's Attorney's Office and was the chief of the Economic Crimes Unit there. And she also started one of the first mortgage fraud units in the nation. I emphasize that because you see them popular now. You look on the television, they talk about the different banks, but it started here in Maryland. And as you will, I think, find out, our Attorney General's office, as well as our Inspector General's office, has been the forefront of capturing money and returning monies to the citizens of Baltimore City and the citizens of the state of Maryland. I'm going to go on to just tell you a little bit more about her. She has an undergraduate degree from James Madison University, a master's degree in business administration, a Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Maryland. She's married with 4 sons and a spoiled cat. I'm a dog person. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Isabel Mercedes Cummings. Last but not least, our Commissioner, Michael Harrison, is here today. Michael S. Harrison was sworn in as Baltimore Police Department's 41st Commissioner on March 12, 2019. And before becoming the commissioner. Commissioner Harris served in the New Orleans Police Department for nearly 3 decades. In fact, that's where I first met him in the 90s. Commissioner Harrison served there with distinction. He received his bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of Phoenix and master's degree in criminal justice from Loyola University in New Orleans. He's a graduate of the Senior Management Institute for Police at Northwestern University's Police Staff and Command and the FBI's National Executive Institute. He honorably served 8 years in the Louisiana Air National Guard, and in 2010, the commissioner was ordained as a minister at the City of Love Church in New Orleans. Commissioner Harrison has been married to his high school sweetheart since 1992 and is a loving parent of 2 adult children. He and his wife are proud residents of Baltimore City. Please welcome Commissioner Harrison. You know, when Ivan puts something together, he makes sure all the bases are covered. And sometimes community folks want to ask questions that are really not squarely law enforcement, but might involve the community at some level. So I have participants. These are people that are going to be part of this conversation tonight. And in the event there are questions that are more appropriate for them, we've got some backup. My first backup is the Honorable Sheila Dixon. She's on the front row. For 3 decades, she has served the Baltimore City in various capacities. She has been a champion of the neighborhoods, a pioneer of women and minority rights. I find her on my street, and sometimes down at the bottom of the hill, and sometimes at the top. We live in the same neighborhood. But when she's not there, she is engaged as a mother, an advocate. She particularly is concerned about vulnerable citizens. She is a very productive member of our community all the time. And I will tell you, she's homegrown in Baltimore City, but you already know that. She's a product of the Baltimore City Public Schools. She attended and has a bachelor's degree in early childhood education from Towson University and a master's degree in education and administration from Johns Hopkins. A former elementary school teacher and an adult education educator, as well as an individual who knows clearly all about Head Start, as she was an instructor there. She has a variety of different interests beyond just education. While serving in West Baltimore, she's been in her neighborhood, she's been a vocal member of our community, advocating for rights and changes that need to occur in West Baltimore specifically. She also, in 1999, became the first woman to hold a citywide position when the voters of Baltimore City elected her city council president. And in 2007, she became the city's first ever female mayor, elected following the succeeding Mayor O'Malley, who became governor. She was actually elected as the 48th mayor for Baltimore City. She's known as a crime fighter who was responsible for reducing and lowering the homicide rate to its lowest rate in 30 years during her administration. I will tell you, I know, because I've seen her kids. She's a mother of 2 adult kids, and she also is a member of Bethel AMA Church. I want you to welcome, please, our former mayor, Sheila Dixon. This is all about a new administration. As I said the other day, we got a new pitcher. And I want to tell you about the pitcher and his team. Who's the pitcher? Mr. Ivan Bates is our new state's attorney. He is the 26th state's attorney for Baltimore City. You probably heard a lot about him, but just in case you haven't, after graduating high school in Virginia, Mr. Bates followed his father's footsteps and joined the United States Army. He graduated from the French Commando School, where he was trained in special operations and served his country in foreign and domestic missions. He was assigned to the 32nd Air Defense Artillery Command in Europe. He completed his undergraduate studies at Howard University. Supposed to say HU? where he graduated with honors. And he was inspired to become a lawyer, to be about justice, because he admired greatly Justice Thurgood Marshall. And he then went to the William and Mary Law School in Williamsburg, Virginia. He was a member of the Black Law Students Association, and he also joined Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated while in law school. I've gained legal experience in a number of different places, but let me just name a couple that stand out in my mind. He worked for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. He also joined and participated in several area law firms. He clerked and served as a law clerk for the Honorable Judge David Mitchell of the Circuit Court for Baltimore City. And he also decided to accept a job in the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. While in the State's Attorney's Office, he moved forward in the process. In the State's Attorney's Office, you start in traffic court and low level, and you work your way through. And he became a homicide assistant state's attorney in that division, advocating for families that were victimized by violent crime. He is one of the premier former partners of a criminal defense firm. That firm was created by Ivan and Tony Garcia, and they named it Bates and Garcia. And they were able to parlay that organization, that firm, into such a national reputation that they were sought after by individuals who wanted them to represent them all over the nation. Many of their cases were very high profile and complex matters. He's argued before the Supreme Court of the United States. He is now leaving that law firm in good hands with Tony Garcia, as it's required that the new state's attorney not have any other outside interests. So that firm is now no longer associated with our state's attorney, but he created it and built it for the last 16 years. I want to tell you, though I have a lot I could say about him, it is really important that you know that he's given this job everything, 100%. And he has a vision of a safer Baltimore City. It starts with building bridges, which is what this is all about tonight. But if you didn't think he was serious, look at the collaboration that he put together in his first week on the job. So now, let's give our new state's attorney a round of applause and a dynamite welcome, the Honorable Ivan Bates.
Good evening, good evening. First of all, I would like to thank Pastor Smith. He was right here. You have truly been an anchor to me. You've been a mentor to me. I want to thank you for the many conversations we've had. Many of you may not remember, or many of you do know. He was a great lawyer before he became a great pastor. He clearly loves the community and loves the people. Thank you in the church. You know, I also want to say thank you to the voters of Baltimore City that believed in me and trusted in me to be the next state's attorney. I recognize the awesome task, and I want to introduce a couple people to you. See, I'm just not going to do the job myself because we can't do this job in the state's attorney's office by myself. I have a couple people who are here with me. First of all, I'd like to call my chief of staff, ask her to stand up, Ms. Angela Galliano. Ms. Galliano, she is a former prosecutor, served a number of years in the state's attorney's office in Baltimore City, did a number of felony cases. She left in 2015, originally from Mississippi. Matter of fact, came to Baltimore to work under Miss Patricia Jessamy. And the other thing that's interesting about Mrs. Jessamy, I worked under her and she hired me. Ms. Inspector General Cummings worked under Ms. Jessamy and hired her. And our U.S. Attorney Erek Barron worked under Ms. Jessamy and hired her as well. Hired him as well. The other thing that I want to talk about is one of my other deputies, Greg Solomon. Deputy Solomon is another one that Mrs. Jessamy hired, and you probably see a theme right here. Ms. Solomon is from New York originally, been the state's attorney's officer for 24 years, if I'm not mistaken. 27, excuse me. Has been in every single division of the state's attorney's office and has historical knowledge and experience to make sure you do the job and do it properly. My chief operation officer, Ms. Catherine Flynn, originally from California, then moved all the way across the country after going to school in Boston area, then came down to Baltimore, and then was a law partner of the firm Mead and Flynn, and then eventually started her own firm. One of the things I always talk about Catherine Flynn, there's just some people that are glue people that hold the team together and just are able to fix those problems, and that's what we have with Catherine Flynn. And then last but not least, my next deputy is Mr. Tom Donnelly. Tom Donnelly is another one that was hired by Patricia Jessamy, and many of us all worked together in those early days. Tom Donnelly actually is an appellate lawyer. We were not only prosecutors, but he had his own law practice. Ms. Flynn and Mr. Donnelly have given up their law practices to come and work in the state's attorney's office. And I want to say thank you to my team because I know we can get the job done. I also like to take an opportunity to thank all of those that participated in a number of the activities and events that we had this week. I mean, for me, we had the Ravens tailgate. I want to say thank you. I want to thank my pastor in my church, New Metropolitan Baptist Church, Pastor Richard Dickens. We had a phenomenal worship service to start the week off right. Then we also had the opportunity, and I had a little hiccup. Let's just say I need to make sure I pay attention, drink a little more water. I've learned rookie mistakes. And I want to thank the ladies and gentlemen over there at University of Maryland Hospital. Thank you very much. It was great seeing you, but I hope to never see you again. I also want to thank the young men that we had the opportunity on Tuesday to welcome the young men at East Baltimore and Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys. You met us out there. It was very important to make sure we showed those young kings that they are positive individuals who believe in you and that you are our future. I want to thank everybody who supported at the inauguration of War Memorial Stadium, everybody over there. I want to thank everybody that came out to the gala, and I also want to thank everybody that participated in our older adult luncheon, because we have your back. But most of all, tonight, I want to thank my panelists who are right here. I want to thank you because to me it's important. When I talk about making a change in the city, I can't do it alone. And if we don't work together as a team, because this is your crime-fighting team, to make sure we work together in lockstep with public safety. We are all committed to the same thing, which is changing, keeping every citizen in Baltimore City, and also with the Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney in the state of Maryland, safe. But tonight we're focusing on Baltimore City. We know that we've had phenomenal leadership in the Inspector General's office, and we know we will continue to rely on that type of leadership to help us prosecute white-collar crimes and fraud in Baltimore City. We know that we'll work and partner with the U.S. Attorney's Office to go after some of these violent offenders that don't need to be prosecuted in state court, need to go to the federal side to get serious time on another level. We know we'll continue to work with the Attorney General's Office to make sure that, because they have the resources to do the wiretaps to go on these violent gangs in Baltimore City, so we will work together to bring you down, to prosecute you. And we know that we cannot do any of this without the men and women of the Baltimore City Police Department. So I'm looking forward to getting started, to hearing what you have to say and your questions. Tonight, I want to listen. I applied for the job. You heard me talk for over a year. You heard me talk for about 20 minutes the other day. I think I've said enough. And tonight I want to do something that very few people do. I want to listen. I want to hear what it is that I need to also do to fill in those blanks so that we can be successful. Thank you so much. And while we have Judge Heard, go ahead and take it away.
Make sure that you have filled out these little cards. I've got a ton of them. And what I'm going to try to do is make sure that if it is a question that is asked on several cards, that I lump them together so everyone can get their answers done. The first question I have is directed at, this would be both Mr. Barron and Mr. Bates, only because I know the answer, having been in the U.S. Attorney's Office and in the State's Attorney's Office, I can answer it. But the question is carjacking a federal offense? And is kidnapping a federal offense? And I'm going to add to it, is carjacking a Maryland offense? And is carjacking a kidnapping a Maryland offense? Let's start with Mr. Barron.
Okay. Well, good evening. Carjacking, and what was the other offense? Kidnapping. Thank you, Shorty. Both are Maryland offenses, and in certain more narrow circumstances, they are federal offenses as well. Thank you.
All right. The next one is, and I think that answers it for you as well. This is related to firearms. What are the guidelines, generally speaking, for charging firearm-related offenses within 1,000 feet of a school, federally, and is there a counterpart in the state legislature?
So I don't believe that there is a state counterpart to the federal school zone statute. And the school zone statute, the main element there is you have to knowingly possess the firearm within the school zone, within 1,000 feet. And so there are a number of factors that come into play into whether we can prove that someone knowingly possessed a firearm within the school zone. Some of it might be where they live. Some of it might be indicate whether there's a school bus or a school sign, but we will evaluate each and every case that comes into our radar for whether or not it fits our criteria, and we can make that case, and we will take it if it does.
Following up on that question, is there a way in which the state's attorney's office could work in collaboration if there was a firearms law under federal law, like 1,000 feet of a school, and not a counterpart under Maryland state law?
Yes, there is. One of the things we can do, we can look to see sometimes the individual's background, their record. If they're a felon and they have previous convictions for felony, they have the handgun, we can ask the U.S. Attorney's Office to take those types of cases. So a lot of times individuals that are carrying around handguns, they may have had 1 or 2 prior convictions. What you are actually doing is you are increasing your record. When you increase your record, you're increasing the likelihood that you will be prosecuted federally. Now, we haven't done that a lot, but one of the things that's very interesting is, having been a defense attorney and done a lot of time on the federal side, the federal work, both Mr. Barron and myself, we're on what's called the CJA panel. And that's the panel where they ask defense attorneys to do federal work. You have to be hand-selected by the judges because of your skill set. Well, what I will tell you is we learned a lot on the defense side, and we will be happy to use that on the state side to prosecute you when you have illegal handguns and you qualify federally, which in turn, there's no parole on the federal side. So when you get to 10 years, you're going to do 10 years. If you give 15 years, you're going to do 15 years. So it's a big difference. So yes, the answer to is that.
If you have a question, Shorty, you know what the rule is. It applies to everyone else. You know, like laws, they apply to all of us. They apply to you. Okay, but today, I'm not putting you out. I'm welcoming you to write down your question, and if you give it to me and put your name on the top of it, I'll make sure it gets asked. How about that? So now we're going to move along, because I don't want to spend time doing that. I want to get to your questions, all right? So several people have submitted questions about how the State's Attorney's Office is going to handle juveniles who are arrested for serious violent crimes. This is not just about guns, but murder or any other violent offense. Mr. Bates, how are we going to handle individuals that may be under the age of 18 and therefore technically juveniles?
You know, it's a case-by-case basis. One of the things we need to understand, what is the alleged crime? We have to understand the individual's age, their background. When you look at a juvenile case, there are a number of factors: the age, amenability to treatment, the background, all those things. And we'll look at that. But what I can say is that we do understand, and everybody talks about the development of juveniles' brains at where they are within the development of being adults and their impulse control and all those issues. But we also have to weigh that with public safety, because we have individuals, for instance, you have a juvenile who commits a murder, there's still a family that's lost their loved one. So we just going to look the opposite way because they're a juvenile? The answer to that has to be no, that we have to begin to hold juveniles accountable. Now, can we do it from the criminal justice system, in which we try to have a understanding where we talk about the wraparound services? Yes, we can do that. But we also have to recognize that there has to be a balance of holding a juvenile accountable, but understanding they are juveniles. Once again, it will be a case-by-case basis. There is no one-size-fits-all, and when you're dealing with juveniles in the criminal justice system.
Yes, you can. Mr. Brown?
Yeah. Hey, let me just say this. I'm going to stand up here for a second. I just came off of a campaign trail for last year. And unlike these esteemed folks here that have years and years of criminal prosecution and defense work, that's not my background. Okay? I've been focusing on policy, the big picture. I've got the privilege of serving as your Attorney General, where a small percentage of the work that we do is in criminal investigations and prosecutions. We do stuff that has very little relevance to what we're talking about tonight. Antitrust, securities, consumer protection is closely related. We represent state agencies across the state. But we have a small but mighty criminal investigation and prosecution unit. And we're going to double the size of that, because we do believe that quality investigations coupled with quality prosecutions is going to contribute to safer neighborhoods. But I can tell you right now that we are not going to prosecute our way to a safer community. We just won't. And as the Attorney General, see now the state's attorney, he's on the ground, okay? 95% of the crime fighting in the state of Maryland happens with the state's attorney in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, all across. My job is to support them. My job is to partner with the U.S. attorney to make sure that our state's attorneys, working with the commissioners, the mayors, the community, are focusing on priority crimes to take up. But for me, my role is a little bit different. My role is to look more broadly, not to say that they're not involved in the broad look. I got to be down in Annapolis fighting for resources to make for, we call them juveniles when they get in trouble, but they're still children. And to make sure that our children have the mental health resources that they need in the system, in our schools, okay? To make sure we've got the wraparound services, to make sure when we talk about the blueprint in Maryland's future, the investment in education, that every community has access to those, give an opportunity to kids. So yes, children who commit violent crimes, the Attorney General stated clearly, they have to be dealt with. But let's just not forget, in Maryland, we prosecute young black and brown men at a rate higher than any other state in the nation. And that accounts for the diversity of this state. We over-incarcerate young black men and brown men. Now, that doesn't mean that if a young black man creates a crime, we say, oh, well, we incarcerate too many of them, so let's just let that. No, that's not what I'm talking about. But we are not going to prosecute our way to a safer and more just society. I got elected to go down to Annapolis to work with these fine people to make sure we can drive down that disparity in incarceration rates, and so that we're not talking about what are we doing with violent children, but we're addressing their needs. It may not happen tomorrow, but I can tell you right now, 4 years from now, we can't turn around and say we drove down the incarceration rate for young black and brown men. I have failed you. That's one test you can hold me to.
So a number of these questions are following up on what Mr. Brown just talked about. But I think as a group, those that aren't in the system may not know. Mr. Bates, what happens when a juvenile is charged with a crime of violence or a drug offense? Can you walk us through the process of reverse waivers and how that's done, and what the state's attorney's role is, and what the judge's role is in that?
So let's go ahead, and there are two examples I give. First, let's say as a kid, a juvenile who's 15 years old, let's say 14 years of age, pulls out a handgun and shoots and kills an individual. That juvenile will be charged most likely with first-degree murder. Being charged with first-degree murder, that case immediately starts in the adult system. Once it's in the adult system, the defense attorney will file a motion to transfer it down to juvenile court. There, the juvenile judge, a judge sitting in a juvenile court, will listen to whether or not that 14-year-old should be tried in adult court or in juvenile court. And once again, there are 5 factors the judge will look at, and will go ahead and weigh those 5 factors. But let's say that it's a case involving a 14-year-old that's not charged with first-degree murder, but they're charged with second-degree murder or manslaughter. That case then would originate in juvenile court, and then the state would make a decision whether or not to file a a waiver petition to go from juvenile court to adult court. It's kind of complicated.
I got him.
But when you look at, say, drugs with juveniles, then we're pretty much going to say if you're 16, 17 years of age, you're charged with a drug crime, your case will start and originate in the juvenile court. Then it'll be up to the state looking at most likely your background. Have you received the resources, or the issues and things like that, whether or not they'll file the motion to take it to adult court. So in the juvenile court, you're only starting in the adult system if the case is very significant and the charge is extremely significant. And from there, it is the judge that makes a decision whether or not that juvenile will be charged and tried. That's the key, tried in adult court or juvenile court.
Thank you. This next question is for, well, it could be a number of people, so I'm going to leave it up to see who wants to. When we talk about partnerships with agencies, what partnerships do you believe need to occur in order for the cities to be safe? What partnership? And I'm going to start with the Attorney General, the IG, Ms. Cummings on the end. What role does the IG's office have in a partnership?
I think my biggest partner is, of course, the citizens, because that's where I get my hotline complaints. We've grown from 70 to, we're right now, 6 months in, have 600. So my biggest partner, I'm not elected, but I've put 2 ballots on to make the office more independent, and we won by 86% because of you. So those are pretty good numbers. So the partnership that's most important from my office, where I get my complaints, where I do my investigations, is from the citizens. It may surprise everybody here, I have cases with every single agency here. So whether Mr. Brown, Attorney General Brown, realizes it, we're partners. You know, the police commissioner knows it. And we, working together, can make a difference. And what I am giving them is what I get from you. So our partnership is what matters.
I'm going to ask the commissioner to answer that one next. Partnership.
Well, first of all, it's a great question, probably one of the most significant questions that will be asked tonight. It is paramount that we have not just partnerships, but good partnerships, because every partner is not a good partner, but we have to have good partnerships. When I say partnerships, I am talking about unfettered access to all the information and all the decisions that are made in each of the agencies, and that we, in a collaborative way, make those sometimes policy decisions and sometimes personnel decisions together, and that we have good data sharing, that we have good information sharing, that we have good technology sharing, and that if I have to pick up the phone and call the state's attorney, which I have done, or the inspector general, which I have done, and said, this is what we're asking, that they can explain to me that they can say yes to it, or if they can't say yes to it, give us the explanation why. But it's when you have those partnerships, that's where you have the success, because the men and women of the police department are out there doing the work. They're out there making the arrests, and we're trying to make good quality criminal cases to bring to prosecution. If for some reason they're not going to prosecution, we need to know why, so that we can then go back and course correct, so that whatever reason that became a barrier, we can overcome that barrier. And sometimes the partnership means I have to call and say, this is what I need to know. And so things that would seem secrecy, that shouldn't exist in partnerships. And it becomes more than partnerships. It sometimes becomes friendships, because we are all on the same team, trying to achieve the same goal and working together, and it's parts of the body. I am only one part of the body, the state's attorney, the attorney general, inspector general, the U.S. attorney. We're different parts of the body, but all working together to achieve the same goal. And I believe you have a world-class Super Bowl Vince Lombardi championship team sitting on this stage tonight.
So there's one part of this team actually that owns the team, and that's the community. So what I want to know, what I want to know is, how are you going to, well, first I want to premise this with, I have about 10 questions on this point. So if you hear your question, but it's not exactly how you wrote it, it's me trying to combine all 10 of them together. I'm going to show my age a little bit. It used to be there were baseball cards They weren't baseball, they were police cards. And they were pictures of officers. And the kids would get them, and in order to get the next card, they had to find an officer they didn't know and go up to them and get the cards. Don't show me, y'all know what I'm talking about. Raise your hand if you remember this, okay? So you know how old I am. So what I want to know is, when I say to you community-oriented policing, when I say to you that your partner and owner of the team is the community, what are you going to do to improve the relationship between the police department and the community and build back that bridge of trust? That's my question.
Absolutely. The thing I failed to say that I probably should have said first was it takes a partnership with the community, because everything we do is for the community and about the community and for the community. And I say this to every recruit class that starts on day one and every recruit class that graduates will graduate a class tomorrow. Build relationships that were never built, improve on good relationships, and repair broken relationships. And the reason I say that, because it is likely the police who broke the relationship in the first place. So it is incumbent upon us to build those relationships, and because we are the first line of contact with community members, we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to build trust. We start by everything we do in our department now, every policy that's written has community input on the creation of that policy. So everything we do has community input. We have community members who come to our police academy to help us deliver training to officers, because it's one thing for an officer to teach an officer and get an officer's perspective. It's something totally different to hear from a community member, from the community member's perspective, to help really give credence to what is expected by the community. And so that's how we are beginning to do that. Then it's about accountability and transparency. Accountability without transparency is not accountability at all, because if we took disciplinary action and nobody knew we did it, it's like we never did it. So it's about accountability and transparency. So co-creation of policy, co-creation of training, and community participation in the delivery of discipline is how we show the community we invite you into what we're doing, and we want to be your partner. And it is not the police and the community, and I'd like everybody to take this tonight. There's no such thing as police and community, because every time we say that, we create two dynamics. We are a part of the community. And every time we say repair police and community relations, we continue to separate us and make it harder to fix. It is community relations, and we are a part of it because we are sworn to protect the community, but we're a part of the community we're sworn to protect. Harm to the community is harm to ourselves.
Thank you. I'm going back to the catalyst of this question. Mr. Barron, what's the partnership look like with the agencies here?
Sure. So I agree 150% with Police Commissioner Harrison about what he said about our partnerships and our goals for our partnerships. I would articulate it, you know, he talked about the Super Bowl team, and I like sports analogies, but I would articulate it like this. I'm trying to transform our partnerships into teamwork. We need teamwork to be out in this community and get what we need done to make these communities safe. Police Commissioner Harrison talked about picking up the phone and making phone calls. That's great. It's great when you can make phone calls and people answer. I'm trying to reduce the number of phone calls he even has to make. So, you know, I want our partnerships to be that seamless. We talked about the community. The community has to be automatically a part of that teamwork, that partnership. My office is trying to lead by example in that respect. I got a prayer corner over here. If you work for the United States Attorney's Office, would you please stand? So we have a community outreach unit in the U.S. Attorney's Office, which used to be maybe one and a half people, but I have enhanced that office. We have volunteers. It includes federal prosecutors, and they are here. Some of them are here right there in that prayer corner with me here today, community partnerships. We are doing more reentry fairs than the office ever has. We are in more schools doing anti-violence, anti-bullying than any federal prosecutor's office in Maryland ever has. And we are trying to lead by example with respect to partnerships and teamwork.
So I'm going to follow up on that with a toughie, and that is a number of people have asked about police misconduct, whether it be a state agency, a city agency, a federal agency. What is the U.S. Attorney's role in that?
We are prosecuting police misconduct, period.
Let me take a little bit of that too, because
Yes.
many know that 2 years ago, the General Assembly gave my office the authority to investigate all police-involved deaths. And in the most recent 12-month period that was reported, there were 24 of those throughout the state. In Annapolis this year, it is very likely that my office will now receive authority to prosecute police officers if the facts support it after the investigation. That's one piece of what the Attorney General's office does when it comes to addressing police misconduct in terms of investigations and potential prosecution. I do want to take this opportunity just to introduce another authority that I am seeking this year. And it's not going to be easy, but I think it's important. It also dovetails with the partnership piece. Because in order to enhance the confidence that the community has in policing, we need to understand and see that we're holding law enforcement accountable. The lion's share of the men and women who raise their right hand to serve and defend, they are honorable police officers. And in every organization, there's misconduct, in every organization. But when there's misconduct among law enforcement, the outcomes can be deadly and tragic. So it's important that we're not only looking at cases of individual misconduct, but I'm asking for the authority to look at pattern or practice of misconduct within a police department, okay? So today, that work is done mostly by the Department of Justice, and Baltimore City has done a consent decree to institute best practices to get it right. I think that work should be done in Maryland. It's not to punish law enforcement, it's to work with law enforcement, partner with law enforcement, identify, is it training? Is it resources? What's creating the culture that is perpetuating repeated misconduct in a department? And this is not something that's unique to any one jurisdiction in Maryland. So that's the authority that we want to enhance the confidence that the community has, knowing that their Attorney General's office is conducting the investigations when they're warranted.
So the last one to answer the partnership question, collaboration question, is you, Mr. Bates. What does your office see as the collaboration?
Well, first of all, you always have to make sure you have the pulse of the community. Because everybody in the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office, we work for you, the residents and the citizens of Baltimore City. You're the ones who go out and work, pay our tax. You pay your taxes and you pay our salaries. So first and foremost, understanding what we need to do for the community. Community says they want to be safe. So then how do we go about making sure we can help the community be safe? Does it mean we're just going to run around and lock up everybody? No. Does it mean that we're going to find that medium of how we can give the wraparound service, potential maybe diversion, but also making sure we have the hammer if we have to go ahead and use it to hold people accountable? Yes. And so do we do that on our own? No. Does that mean that if we have an investigation where a business, an employee has stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars, that is something that the Inspector General's office is working on, and we're partnering with them, and they've done the background, they've done the investigation, and now we're partnering to have that criminal prosecution? Yes. But what about the violent drug gang that's sitting there terrorizing the neighborhood? No one can go out their house because they're selling drugs, and they've been doing it, and they have guns, and they're doing everything imaginable, kidnapping, all those crimes, but it's an organization. Then we partner with the federal side to have a RICO, because it gets everybody all at once. But then what about if we have other organizations with wiretaps that aren't maybe as prevalent, but also here, their tentacles are also here in Baltimore City as well? Then we have the Attorney General's office. But we can't do any of that without the people who are going to initiate that, which are the police officers, the men and women of Baltimore City's police department. So it all has to work together. The citizens need to be safer, and we need to do our part to ensure that we are the team to do that and make it happen.
Keep the mic on, because I have a quick question for you. A number of people want to know, are you or are you not going to prosecute low-level crimes? And that's basically asked in about 5 or 6 different ways on about 10 different cards. That's the question.
Well, I tried to make myself clear during the campaign. I thought I made myself clear on Tuesday, so it's crystal clear. I believe every single law that's on the books, the police have the opportunity to enforce it. If they're going to have the opportunity to enforce it, then we'll sit down and look, and then yes, they can possibly be prosecuted. However, first and foremost, how do we go about this? I'm not looking to try to lock people up for low-level offenses, but we have to hold people accountable for their actions. So in holding people accountable, first, we partnership, once again, with the mayor's office, Monzi. They have the programs already in place. They have the low-level diversionary programs in place. We can direct these individuals to the diversionary programs. We can give these individuals the job resources and the training and all the skill set that they may need to have that job. We're not trying to lock you up or give you a criminal record. But if a person continues to show time and time again that they don't want to follow the law, that they want to do what they want to do, and they don't want to avail themselves to these to the diversionary programs, you asking to be prosecuted. So the citizens, when I knocked on those 15,000 doors, what they told me is they wanted me to hold people accountable. And just because, and I always go back to my father with this, he'd tell me something one time, and after that it was on me. So when I'm saying it again, I'm not looking to prosecute or put people in jail for quality of life crime. I'm not. However, you have to be held accountable. The days of doing whatever you want to do in Baltimore City, we can't have that.
So there are about 10 questions, and I'm going to field this question to Mayor Dixon, because I think she can best answer that from the city's perspective. Is there a connection between vacant houses, lead paint housing on properties, and Baltimore City ordinances that may allow the Department of Housing or the city to step in and either take control or condemn those properties? Do you understand the question? There's the mic here.
I understand the question, and vacant properties is a huge issue, as many people know. And this has not just happened overnight. It's happened over 30, 40 years. But what people have to understand is that housing has certain laws on the books that can condemn the properties or take properties away from property owners, but there's a process if you're a private owner of a property. For vacant properties, it takes a lot of money. And part of the challenge and struggle that the city faces as people leave Baltimore City, and this has happened 30 years now or more. When I grew up, as I shared yesterday at the older adult event, there were close to 1 million people living in Baltimore City. So we were getting not only property tax money, we were getting piggyback tax as part of what goes to the state and the city where you live and if you're working. That's all general fund. So when you see people leaving in roads, and now Baltimore City is at 570 people, some say 90, some say less. It's in the 500s. Baltimore County has over close to 900,000 people because of Baltimore City. So the revenue is not there to the degree for a city government to really tackle the number of properties that are vacant. So we need to be a little creative. One of the things, and this is where this partnership, when you talk about partnership, when you are in public office, if it's appointed or elected, you've got to take your ego and put it in your pocket. And in doing that, I'm just going to give you an example where I believe we'll be a lot further, and I understand now the council's looking at this. If you have a block of property that's vacant in your neighborhood, one of the things that Detroit has done, Cleveland has done, and I've done extensive research on this, but because of my colleagues having other motives, we couldn't move it forward. You could take that block, literally, create a land bank, and if you find an individual or a developer, could be small, but you have to show that you can develop that property. We can eliminate those liens and give that block to that small developer to develop, to put it back on the tax roll. So now we're at the point where we have to be creative, because where there's vacant properties, where there's grime and crime, it all goes together. But we have to begin to look creative. In some neighborhoods, and people don't like to hear this, we've got to eliminate it altogether. You got to clear it away and think of something more creative, creating an industrial space or creating a new senior community. But in some neighborhoods, we're never going to get back. So if people tell you, well, you can take that house and you can renovate it and put a person in there that's homeless, maybe so, maybe not. The bottom line is we've got to be creative in Baltimore City today because we don't have the revenue to really develop the property that's out there, because the vacants keep coming. But there are laws on the books, but the process takes so long. So hopefully the administration goes in January to the legislature. I know there's Councilman Conway's here, to look at making some changes so that the city can acquire those properties easier. But in doing that, it gives more vacant properties to the city. So we've got to be more creative in how we eliminate that. So the essence of what I'm trying to say is that it takes a lot of money, billions of dollars, to eliminate the amount of vacant properties we have. And so we've got to start being creative and working with communities to come up with plans. And the land bank, and I will go to my grave on this, I know will work. So as citizens of Baltimore, go to your council people, push them to revisit. It's already been researched. We already have all the information. They can tweak it or do whatever they want to it, but that's a way to eliminate the number of vacant properties in Baltimore City. So hopefully it answers that question, because it's complicated legally and the laws are on the book, but it's also a strong financial, and that's why it's important for us to attract and maintain people, and we've got to do that by what? Why are people leaving Baltimore City? Crime and schools. People that have little children who live in certain neighborhoods, once they get of a certain age, they look at the schools, they're out. Now they're not going to Baltimore County because Baltimore County has some challenges. Now they're trying to figure out, how can I afford to live in Howard County? Or how can I afford to live in another county? I mean, I'm just trying to be straight and honest with you. And last but not least, those of us who are seniors, we want to stay here in the city, but it's difficult. And so we have to make sure we take care of those individuals who want to maintain it. So hopefully that tried to answer your questions with giving you some ideas on how to move this process forward of dealing with the vacant properties in Baltimore City.
Thank you, Ms. Dixon. As expected, I have about 10 questions about, or 15, on just, in a nutshell, Mr. Bates, what is your gun policy?
When I ran on the campaign trail, and even Tuesday, I stated the gun policy, just so it's clear. first-time offenders, second-time offenders, repeat violent offenders. It doesn't matter. If you have an illegal handgun in Baltimore City, we're going to ask that you go to jail. Now, one of the things that we also recognize is that just going to jail, it could be a conviction. That doesn't mean that we're not going to also give the first-time offender a path to erase that criminal conviction. But they're going to have to earn that opportunity to have that probation before judgment. I do not want everybody to have records, but you also have to be held accountable. The whole focus and purpose is that every time you talk, and I'd like to have the police commissioner talk about this, every time I look around, the police are talking about they're getting more and more guns off the streets. When I first was a defense attorney, everybody was arrested with drugs and very few people were arrested with guns. Then at the tail end of my career, no one was arrested with drugs, everybody was arrested with guns. Guns are what's being used to kill and terrorize our community. Now, if you're a repeat violent offender, I gotta ask once again that we invoke what's called the mandatory minimum, and you will receive 5 years without the possibility of parole for that illegal handgun. And if you qualify, I'm calling my friend over here and asking him and the U.S. Attorney's Office to take your case so you can get a significant amount of jail time.
And with a certain number, it can be 15 without parole or 20 without parole on the federal side, and you don't serve your time in Maryland, right, Mr. Barron?
That's correct, Judge Heard. We're lowering our criteria for taking cases. We're trying to take as many gun cases and work with the state's attorney's office as possible.
Thank you.
Excuse me. I was just curious. I know I've heard the police commissioner talk about the number of guns that they've been getting off the streets. Could you just tell the ladies and gentlemen what's
Yes, sir.
going on?
This past year in 2022, the Baltimore Police Department took over 2,400 guns off the streets of Baltimore, with making more than 1,600 arrests for people with those guns in 1 year. Now, just to put that in perspective, with fewer than 2,200 police officers, that's more guns taken off the street and more arrests than when the department had 3,000 police officers 10 years ago. So we're doing more work, better work, with far fewer people. What we want to make sure of is, because we know that individuals who are caught carrying guns are the same individuals who are being shot and the same individuals who are doing the shooting. The numbers are the same. And I think there was a study I studied that remains true today. About 66% of people who are caught with a gun one time are 66% likely to be shot, and are 66% likely to be a shooter. Individual caught with a gun twice and arrested twice are above 90% likely to be shot, and over 90% likely to be a shooter. So it's all connected and interrelated. We have to change the thinking of why the individual think he or she needs to carry a gun in the first place. Because if you carry it, you're likely to use it or have it used against you. And what we want to see as a police department and as a city, we want to see people make better decisions of how to solve their conflict, and not just think that they have to solve their problems and solve the conflict with the gun. And the conflict is usually over something very stupid and very, very minor. We want to make sure that if and when we make those arrests, that the individual, number one, doesn't come back out and commit the crime again. So we have to figure out how to change their thinking and help them not do that again, and then help them not go out and become a victim or the perpetrator of a crime. It's not just to arrest for the sake of arrest. We want to change the behavior.
And let me also piggyback on that, if I may. When I talk about sending people to jail for guns, this isn't something I just came up with. Johns Hopkins did a study. They looked at certainty of consequences was the number one thing to stop people from having that type of behavior to carrying illegal guns. So if I'm telling you that there will be a certainty of consequence, I want you to understand, I don't want to lock you up. I don't want to put you in jail, but I need you to think twice before you carry that gun. because what's happening as of yesterday, you have high school students on lunch break and someone with a gun shoots and kills them, takes that life. We have to do something because enough is enough. And right now, what I see happening are the illegal guns. We're not saying we just want to lock you up and throw away the key. What we're saying is leave your illegal guns at home. Do not touch them. Do not take them. Matter of fact, leave them wherever they were.
And if I may add to that, we spend a lot of time talking about the person carrying the gun, the person pulling the trigger, but we also have to talk about people who are facilitating these guns coming into the city. Whether they're your traditional guns or whether they're ghost guns that you can order on the internet and have delivered to your front door without anyone knowing, which can never be traced because it has no serial number. We have to tackle it all. And in partnership with the state, with our federal partners, we are doing that work. But it is hard, but it does require, this is the partnership with the community, it does require in our efforts to enforce the community effort to inform and to change the thinking of why you got to have it in the first place. Much of that change of thinking will come with consequences. Some of it will have to be education and services to offer people a better life and a pathway away from this life.
Okay, my next question is for Ms. Cummings. I need you to identify part of your responsibility as the OIG, and do you, in your office, conduct audits? Is that part of your job or responsibility? If it is not, do you know who does?
Our job is waste, fraud, and abuse in Baltimore City, focused on financial. We do not do audits. The auditors of Baltimore City is in the comptroller's office. He has 40 staff members that do audits for Baltimore City. When I started, I had 5 people. I had to decide what was going to be the best for Baltimore City, and it was to do investigations. We do investigations of the money. We follow the money. And we get tips from the citizens and employees and other people that tell us, contractors, employees, inspectors not doing their job. They'll notify us, and we will do an investigation based on that. My deputy, who's here, who's my prayer person, Yvonne, she wants to develop an evaluations program where we can actually look at certain departments. Like we did a joint with Baltimore County about the water system. And that ended up being a big report that we issued because there's a lot of problems with the water. And as a result of that, it ended up a lot of money was recovered because they were charging people for the wrong water, and people weren't being charged in large areas, large buildings weren't being charged at all. Whereas other people, of course, were being almost thrown out of their house for not having the water thing. So we looked at that, and that was also as a result of a citizen type of complaint. We do not do audits per se, but a lot of what we do involves looking at how things are done, how the process is. And the other thing that we also do is we are part of the ethics program here in Baltimore City. And that was turned over to my office in 2019. So once it came over, the ethics board has actually become much more invigorated, and we are trying, because without ethics, you don't have that strong government. And we needed to get the type of focus, because we have to do financial disclosures, we have to do the lobbyists, all those things, all this money comes in the city, we have to evaluate all of that. And a lot of times, that's why we fought so hard to make sure that the citizens were going to be on the advisory board of the Inspector General and not the people that I had to investigate. And I am forever grateful to the citizens for realizing that obvious conflict of interest. And so now the citizens are actually applying to be on the advisory board, and that's happening right now. So this office, I will say, and the important thing you mentioned before, we try to be responsive. Even with, we have one person that just takes care of the hotline. And they actually, in the entire time through the pandemic, we actually, if we can't help you, we tell you where to go. Because a lot of times you just can't even get a person to be interested in what you have. I mean, we work for you. So we try to be responsive. And obviously, by the way the hotline continues to increase, I think that my office has tried to put the citizens first, because really, we truly work for you, and you are where we get our cases and how we are successful. Thank you.
Within the investigative mode, some of those cases are sent to the Attorney General's office. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So you want to tell us about the fraud unit and the Attorney General's office?
Yeah.
If I could just briefly describe and I do say limited criminal functions in our office. We have a few of them. One is criminal appeals, right? We represent the state's attorneys across the state when their cases are on appeal in the Appellate Court of Maryland and Supreme Court of Maryland. So we've got a really close relationship and partnership there. I mentioned before the Criminal Investigation Division, sort of 4 areas. I won't go in deep on all of them. One is Medicaid fraud. People file fraudulent claims in Medicaid, health claims. Some of that rises to the level of criminal conduct. We go after that. A limited set of environmental crimes, illegal dumping, the intentional storage of hazardous materials, things like that. There are like 4 categories there. The other is, and really the biggest and probably most relevant to what we're talking about now, is that organized crime unit that I mentioned. Now, with that authority, I can't come into Baltimore City today or tomorrow or next week and start investigating and prosecuting crime. I can't do that. I can't do that unless I'm in partnership with your state's attorney. What I can do, and I still do it in partnership, but I can initiate it, is multi-jurisdictional crime. We're talking about narcotics trafficking. The commissioner was talking about the number of unlawful guns he's taken off the streets. So many of them are coming from outside of Baltimore City. So my organized crime unit is working with the U.S. attorneys, state's attorneys in different jurisdictions, law enforcement at different levels in different jurisdictions. We have that multi-jurisdictional gun trafficking, narcotics trafficking, human trafficking, both sex and labor. So we've got that. And again, I need to double that size, because with the volume that we've been hearing today about guns and drugs, I need more resources, because Mr. Bates does not do multi-jurisdictional prosecutions. I do that. The U.S. attorney will do that in the state of Maryland. But together we work to make that happen. So those are the areas in which the Office of the Attorney General is investigating, prosecuting different types of crimes.
So my next group of questions, I've divided them into categories. I need you to write them down. I can't do that, because if you see what I have here, someone will give you a card. I need you to understand that everyone here has an important burning question. And y'all see me reading. I'm trying to read. My bin is empty. The only thing in here is the ones you guys we've asked. We are going to have it opened up at the end in 15 minutes. And at that time, if you can, where's Mr. Giordano? If you see Mr. Giordano, and tell him, he's in the lobby. Mr. Giordano, would you come forward and see this young lady? In the meantime, this next group of questions, they were all about the same thing. Each of these that I have in my hand, they either talk about their particular community, a specific corner, They talk about a gas station, a shopping center. This stack, they're all saying the same thing. And as a federal prosecutor, we had a name for them. They were hot spots. What I want, and they want to know, we know where they are. We know what happens there. Mr. Bates, what are we going to do? Mr. Commissioner, what are we going to do? Mr. Barron, what are we going to do? Mr. Brown, what are we going to do about the hot spots? The open air, I'm a judge retired, but if I needed to buy some illegal drugs, you tell me the drugs, I'll tell you where I go to get it. That shouldn't be. You all know what I'm saying. I raised my kid here. I know where the hot spots is, and I can walk to Edmondson Village Shopping Center. I like the Ritas. So tell me, what are you going to do? Mr. Bates.
You know, one of the things that we have to do is, that's why we're here tonight, to talk about how we work collaboratively. State's Attorney's Office, we don't go out and make the arrest, the police do. But the police work, put together a good case, then they bring it to the State's Attorney's Office and it falls apart. Then they're demoralized. But we have to work together. So we know where the hot spot is. Then what we do is we sit together and we talk about a plan. If one of the things we can do is decide, okay, we know this person, that person, it's a drug organization, we see violence, we see guns, then we can sit down together with our various divisions and find out a wiretap who has the resources necessary to be able to make this plan effectuate and make it work. And that's not just the State's Attorney's Office, the U.S. Attorney and the Attorney General's Office, along with the police department. The police will be that frontline unit, that frontline division that will execute the plan, and it will be one of us or all of us together that will prosecute the plan. For instance, some of these individuals may be a RICO case, and that's where the government comes, and they have a big case, and they charge you as being a drug organization or an organization that's doing violent crime. But let's say there are a couple individuals that wouldn't necessarily qualify to be prosecuted federally, then we can come on and bring you stateside. That way no one gets away and that everybody can be held accountable. So I guess from my standpoint, that's where I look at it. Commissioner, what are you thinking about?
I agree wholeheartedly with you. We know where they are too. You tell us every day. We know where they are, and our officers, we still make a lot of drug arrests. And we go after and make arrests of drug dealers all the time. Persons who are just in possession of drugs has been one of the crimes that has not been prosecuted. So we had to adjust policy on how we go about catching drug dealers if we're not arresting the drug people who are in possession of it. We know where they are, but we are working right now. We have, with everyone on this stage, not the Inspector General, but with all of the prosecutors, we have joint investigations underway at multiple parts of the city. You may not know about them, and we take those organizations down. Do others rise up the next day or the same day and take over? Absolutely. But we take them down and we arrest them. The issue is, back to what Mr. Bates opened up with. When these young men and some young women get arrested, and they are not changed, and they are not helped, and they are not given a pathway away, they come out and do the same thing all over again. And so while we are arresting people, they're coming out doing the same thing on the same corner, sometimes the same day. And so it is all of us working together with every part of the criminal justice system. And when we say enforcement, for far too long, enforcement has only been a conversation, and we think the police interaction. Enforcement is the police encounter all the way up through the arrest, the prosecution all the way through the conviction, and the incarceration all the way to that person's rehabilitation. All of that is enforcement. All of that has not always existed. And so, but I'm just too excited to be here with all of our partners to talk about how we together, with you, go out and make it better. But yes, do we need more enforcement? Do we need more of it? Can we go and get more people? Yes. Can we take down more organizations? Absolutely. Are we working to do that as we grow and expand our capacity and do more with less? Absolutely. But now we have a way where we're going to see that our work has meaning, and our officers, hopefully we want to change the behavior once again. When we arrest somebody, we want to see the behavior change. It's not our intention to see them go to prison for life. We want to see them stop doing what they're doing. We want to see the improvement of our community.
Thank you. I'm going to move along a little bit. The next group of questions all have to do with diversionary programs. In other words, what programs? I think Mr. Barron talked about some things that their LECCs were doing in their U.S. Attorney's Office and the collaboration there. Mr. Bates, I know you have some programs that you want to talk about, of things that you'd like to do. There is a program called Aim to Be More. There are internships. There are diversionary programs that the community's been hearing about. Can you elaborate on what you're talking about with regard to diversionary programs and other programs? If you're going to ask the police department to go after those low-level crimes, what are you going to do with the young people that may be given tickets or arrested for those cases?
One of the things we're looking at all the programs that the state's attorney's office has. You mentioned Aim to Be More. So that was a program that deals with individuals that are convicted of a crime. But we began to look at it, my first day in office, we realized there was only 17 people being serviced, but there were almost $500,000 in salaries toward these 17 people. So I don't really view that as a real diversionary program. What we need to do is we're going to partner with everybody. And that specifically is looking at MONSI, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods, because they have the resources. For instance, one of the things I also realized, a number of individuals, we're not talking about just locking you up for drug possession, but once there's enforcement of drug possession, well, why don't we divert you into drug treatment programs? That's not happening. In 2012, there were over 585 people in drug treatment programs. Last year, there were only 80. Think about that right there. There were over 500 people that weren't being serviced, but yet overdose had jumped from 300-400 to over 1,000. So those types of diversionary programs help us. But we also have to understand, what are we doing about the returning citizens? Returning citizens are the individuals, when you look at organizations such as, I see someone, Mr. Chris Irving, the Lazarus program. These are programs that are already out there in the community. When you also look at her resiliency program dealing with sex workers and what they do, those are the individuals and the organizations that we want to partner with, because we're not leading the charge, we're a part of the process to help change. And it's not about locking everybody up. So we talk about going back and saying we're enforcing low-level quality of life crimes. It's about giving the police the tools in the toolbox, but also making sure now these individuals that are crying out for help with their actions can be diverted into the treatment necessary and diverted into programs necessary that they need.
All right, my clock's running down. Next category of questions. They're all about vulnerable adults. And the question involves homeless. How do you handle them as part of public safety, Chief Harrison? And in the alternative, if it relates to loitering in public places, Mr. Bates? And how do you handle doing what you need to help the other vulnerable adults who may be seniors? Either one of those groups may have health issues. Either one of those groups may have mental health issues. Either one of those groups may have housing issues. As the state's attorney, is there a role you have? As the police, do you have a role in that? Mr. Chief, you want to start?
Yeah, the police will always have a role, but when it comes to things like homelessness, when it comes to things like mental illness and other things that are social issues, we play a support role. The police, what we don't want to do is criminalize individuals for being homeless and criminalize individuals for being in mental crisis. We can support, but the mayor's office has an entity and an office that delivers frontline support to all of those individuals. We can play a support role, but what we don't want to do, what we have done in the past and have got in trouble for, and trying not to do again, is to enforce that and make that an enforcement issue and make the police the solution to a problem that we're not trained for and it's not for law enforcement.
Thank you. Mr. Bates?
You know, one of the things we talk about the quality of life crimes, talking about loitering trespass. Look, we can have these young individuals, some of them young, some a little older. Why don't we do some community service, something very positive where you're holding an individual accountable? That's one of the ways you look at it. Now, one of the things to me that's also important I talked about is what we're going to do about our older adult population. You know, I see Ms. Sarah Matthews out here, who's been a major advocate for the older adult population. And sitting down and talking about the older adult population, they've been totally marginalized and forgotten in our city for too long. One of the things that I plan to do, and I talked about, is going to the General Assembly asking for money to have an older adult division. This division needs to focus on a lot of the crime that we see in Inspector General. Inspector General, I'd love to hear, you know, some of the insight that you have in reference to the vulnerability of the older adult population, because they are being traumatized. Their life savings is being taken and stolen, and we don't talk about it. And so for us, that older adult division, that's what we'll focus on. But a lot of the work's already being done by the Inspector General. You want to talk about it?
I think elder abuse financially is a major focus, and it needs to become a major focus in Baltimore City. Back when I was with Ms. Jessamy, I actually wrote up an elder abuse unit, and it was actually used in Anne Arundel County. And I think now's the time for that unit to actually happen in Baltimore City. So I'm very happy to hear that, Ivan. And we will be happy we get a lot of hotline complaints about this, and we will be happy to work with you with that.
So
If I can also add, 'cause I mentioned that there were 4 areas of criminal investigation, prosecution, and I guess nobody was keeping track of my count because I only said 3. The fourth one is the new authority we got, I think, 3 or 4 years ago, particularly when it comes to adult vulnerable populations, the scam artists. It's not always strangers either on the internet. It's sometimes family members scamming family members. So we have the authority both under consumer protection, but also when we discover criminal conduct to go after it. But admittedly, I will say our office needs to step up our efforts, particularly on the education and the outreach, because there are a lot of things that seniors can do, all of us can do, frankly, to be much more aware of what those scams look like. Because I can tell you right now, just from personal experience, about, 3-4 weeks ago, I got a call, saying, oh, my Amazon account, this, that, and the other thing. And I found myself in a conversation with someone, and all of a sudden I was like, whoa, man, I'm about to give up some stuff here, some information. And I'm like, I just got elected Attorney General, and I'm falling into this trap. So it's out there, it's real. We have to do a better job at educating, getting into particularly in like senior centers and different community venues where we're educating how to avoid a lot of these snares, these scams.
Mr. Barron, would you talk about the effect of using federal resources to help seniors, especially like theft of the mail and that type of fraud, and how the feds work with it?
Sure, it's a subject near and dear to my heart, so much so that after less than a year, my office has been named a National Elder Abuse and Elder Justice Strike Force. So, thank you. We are not just with the resources of our office, but with national resources from DC and elsewhere. We are going after anyone and everyone in any organization that would dare abuse and misuse and take advantage of our senior citizens.
All right. I got one big category that remains, and then I'm going to hand it over. And uh-oh. What are you playing? Okay, so we've already covered this. We talked about diversionary programs, apprenticeship programs, and the like. But I specifically have questions here about how, and all of you are basically covering this area, but there's something called integrity units, okay? The police department has internal investigations. Mr. Brown has already talked about the fact that there are investigations that they do on a state level. Mr. Bates, they may not know about the case integrity, conviction integrity unit. And of course, I don't know if anyone knows about the type of investigations that the U.S. attorneys. Will each of you just briefly describe the unit that you have in your office and what they do, starting with Chief Harrison.
Thank you. So we have what's called, what was renamed from Internal Affairs to the Public Integrity Bureau, which handles both citizen complaints against police officers and supervisory complaints against our members, or self-initiated complaints against our own members. We handle both of those. We have more than doubled the size of that unit by making it a priority, elevated the position from a director position to a deputy commissioner position, because that person speaks on my behalf and that person can report directly to the federal judge that oversees our consent decree. That was the purpose of elevating the leadership to a deputy commissioner position, so that no one else in the agency can override a decision about discipline. And that person, when they speak about what's happening with discipline, they have the equivalent authority of any other deputy commissioner or the authority that I have. Within the Public Integrity Bureau, we have an ethics unit that handle the more intense or more sensitive cases or covert cases that have to be worked against our own members. And we have oversight from the Department of Justice overlooking everything that happens in the Public Integrity Bureau.
And if you determine your officers have a mental health, a drug, or alcohol issue, what do you do then?
We have an officer wellness program, and when we find that, we make referrals for officers to get help. When officers self-report that they need help, we allow them the time off without punishment and without taking away their credentials and their authority as a police officer, so that we can remove the stigma of coming forward to say you need help. And we have had many officers to take advantage of it, because it has been a stigma for officers to come forward and say they need help, either with mental illness, with addictions of different type, with family problems that cross over into work performance. And so we have to be very careful, and we're leading the way. We have one of the best in the nation in the Baltimore Police Department. If we are a healthy police department, then we can do a better job delivering better police services to the community.
Mr. Brown, do you have anything to add to that for your department or your agency?
Not in line with, I think, the question that you asked about sort of integrity units looking at ongoing conduct. But I do want to take this opportunity to say that, as many of you know, certainly before I was Attorney General, which wasn't that long ago, but we reviewed cases from the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. You remember in the George Floyd case, the former Maryland Chief Medical Examiner testified in an outrageous fashion, and his conclusions that the defense attorneys were using were just found outlandish and outrageous by the entire universe of chief medical examiners. It caused us in Maryland to look at a large universe of cases that involve primarily black and brown victims. We've narrowed it down to a much smaller universe, and we're going to the General Assembly this session asking for the money, the resources, to do a deep dive to find out if there were erroneously acquired convictions based on the perhaps even false or misleading testimony of the former chief medical examiner. So
I wanted to do one more follow-up. Thank you, sir. One more follow-up. In an act of transparency and accountability, one of the first things I did, and I don't want to put the IG on the spot, but because we knew we had to revamp and redesign and create accountability within our own Public Integrity Bureau, when there is a conflict because a complaint has come in against a high-ranking member, or a conflict where we're investigating our own and there's some perceived conflict, one of the first things I did was ask the Inspector General to take and investigate those things, all the way up to investigations and complaints against me. And we have a memorandum of understanding that any complaint of a command member or higher that comes into the organization, we will not investigate those on our own, but we have asked the Inspector General. And when there are conflicts within our own, and we have to ask someone else to do it, she has agreed, and we have a memorandum of understanding, and there have already been several that they have done, just to eliminate the conflict or the perception of nepotism in the police department.
Mr. Bates, the integrity unit.
Well, a couple of ways of looking at it. Not only does the Inspector General, but we also have our Police Integrity Division that looks at what's been going on, some of the potential criminal complaints that have been lodged against the Baltimore City Police Department. We will sit down, we'll look at it, and if they're eligible to be prosecuted, then we will go ahead and prosecute and hold those officers accountable who break the law. So we have that division in the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. We also will have another division called Criminal Integrity Division at CIU. And so it's going to look at the criminal investigation unit. One of the things they look at is past convictions to make sure they were done properly. One of the things you hear about a lot of times, or maybe hear an officer may have lied or fabricated evidence, we will look at that particular case to see what happened. What if they withheld a piece of evidence to sit down and say, hey, it wasn't this person that did the shooting or the murder, it was somebody else. And years later, someone else finally comes forward. We have a division that will sit down, we'll look at that, and if we find that it's there, you know, they'll bring it from the Public Defender's Office to the defense side. They'll bring us that information. We'll do an investigation. If that investigation shows that that individual should not be in jail, then we will go ahead and petition the court to make sure that that individual's conviction could be overturned.
Mr. Barron, you already have. You know what? No, you know what? Let me just say this. You know, when you have rules, they apply to everyone. And I said I would give you a chance, but it's not now. I want to finish up with this category and let everyone finish answering this last question. And if you would be respectful.
Good evening, everybody. I don't mean to be disrespectful.
But you are.
But it took me 2 years to get right here. My brother's story is going to be told today. My brother, Tavon Anderson, was murdered January the 20th, Inauguration Day, 2021. I have been trying to fight for my brother and get answers for my brother. My brother was brutally murdered by a white man that was riding around the city like Lee Malvo, taking people's lives. Not only is this white guy a suspect for my brother's murder, but he's also a suspect for 2 other murders in the city of Baltimore. He's been arrested in another state. They haven't brought him back.
There is a new state's attorney. This is a new, and he is going to hear you. He is going to hear you.
This is,
But that was another.
Excuse me,
That's
ma'am. Excuse me, one thing. I understand why we do this, ma'am. I want you to go ahead and see that gentleman walking towards you. I want you to give his name and your information, and we'll go ahead and figure out what's going on, and we'll sit down and we'll have that conversation, okay?
That's what you do. That's what you do. Thank you.
We ain't gonna be talked about, we're gonna be talked to. This is the community.
I'm just going to say this to everyone that's in this room, and I need you to hear what I'm saying. There is a new state's attorney. He cannot be held accountable for what someone else did or did not do. But what you can do is hold him accountable for what he is saying right here and right now. Hold him accountable for what he is saying. He has been in office 4 days. 4 days. You're being rude. So your issues are more important than everyone else because you won't let me talk. This will not be your only opportunity. This is basically tell me what you want to do.
Excuse me,
Listen to her.
Excuse me.
Listen to her.
This is what I would like. I can only imagine her pain. I see it. But what I'll say is this. We will have a conversation, but we're just not going to have it this second, ma'am. Been there 3-4 days. We will have that conversation. Do me a favor. If you just go, there's a gentleman. We'll get your information, and we'll have that conversation.
How mothers of murder victims are feeling today. You don't feel our pain because you go home to your child every night. My son is laying in a pine bus, and he can't get up from that. And then to let you know, I had not a brown or a black guy who murdered my son, but a white guy who came from his cozy condo in Parkville, Maryland, and stabbed him to death. Do you know what that knock on the door from Baltimore City Police feel like? No, you don't. Do you know the pain that we go through every day? No, you don't. So yes, it is about the community. It is about the people who suffering every single day that you're not giving us the opportunity to tell how we really feel. What about the psychology and mental breakdown that we go through? Nobody knows that. See, when you are considered a nobody, this is how they do you. They want to shut you up. They don't want you to be heard, and they want you to take what they have to give.
This
And I'm not saying he's not. I'm not saying he's not. And I like the way he's coming out swinging. You're going to jail. I love that. But when we have town halls, it's for the community. It's for us.
and that's what this is. This last pile is about victims of crime. Victims of crime. And that's what this 20 pile is about, victims of crime. These are the questions you have asked, and they're all about victims, being a victim, being victimized, being harassed, having your kids murdered.
Go to these funerals of these young black men every single day, 5, 6, 7 times.
Ma'am, you don't know how many funerals of young black men I have gone to that I'm not even related to. And you are right. I have a daughter who's alive, but I participate on a grassroots group called, let me finish. I'm part of a group called Stop the Mothers from Crying. If you're a grassroots person, you know that organization. They go into the schools and work with traumatized kids who've had family members murdered. I can't feel, I will never know.
Excuse me, ma'am,
But
Excuse me.
This state's attorney
Excuse me, ma'am.
cares about it, and let him tell you.
I thank you for saying, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Yes.
But it's 8 o'clock right now.
Yes.
We will have that opportunity to have that conversation. Everybody in here has listened. Everybody here has followed the rules. One of the things we have to do, we have to show respect with one another. And I understand you're hurting. I do. And you and I will have that conversation. But right now, we want to go ahead. We started this night on a tremendous high. All of us are in this together. And you allow us to do the work that we need to do, the police to do their job, my office to do the job, we can begin to allow you to heal. You'll never have that child back, and I get that, and I understand. I'm sorry for you. I will continue to pray for the victims, homicide victims of Baltimore City. Part of the reason I ran was because I saw too many young brothers looking like me murdered. And that is why I have decided to focus on illegal handguns. Not because I want to put black men in jail, but because they're committing the crime carrying these guns, killing people that look like me and your son every day. So for me, I will hear you. I've heard and I will listen. We will have our opportunity. And the young lady right there will sit and talk to you from our office, okay, ma'am? I will continue to think about you and your family. We will talk. Thank you.
Mr. Bates, if you'll come up, because you're right, we're at the 8, and if I will just to tell you that this stack of 20 is about what are you going to do with victims of crime, what are you going to do with the unit that deals with victims when they have to testify, when people have to come to court. Please, your closing remarks, if you could address that, then I'm done.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Judge Heard, Wanda Heard, for doing a phenomenal job today. I would also like to thank all the panelists who've been here tonight, taking the opportunity to listen to you. I want to thank Pastor P.M. Smith, the church, for opening their doors. But most of all, I want to thank you, the citizens that came out, whether you watched, whether you streamed, whether you sent your questions, whether you wrote questions, thank you for being here and being a part of this conversation. Now, from my office, State's Attorney's Office, one of the things we realized as victim witness, that division needed a little bit of change, and we'll work to make that change happen. But let's be clear. See, the police will make the arrest, and we'll put together the case to prosecute it, but we also need the community to be a part. See, the community, they're seeing what's happening. They're understanding what's happening. They watch what happened. We recognize that you're afraid to come and testify, to give us that information, to talk to the police, and then you hide, you run away. I understand, I get that, because you don't feel safe. Well, part of us joining together is to do everything we can to help you feel safe. The U.S. Attorney's Office has money to keep victims and witnesses safe, the Attorney General's office, and the police department, and my office. We have to redefine the way in which we deal with victims and witnesses, but the community, you also have to do your part as well. And when we talked about partnership and building bridges, it's building bridges with the community and all of us to allow us to put together those cases so we can get mothers like her the justice to remove and hopefully begin to remove the pain that she's feeling. And we have to work together. It's not going to be simple. It's not going to be easy. And there is absolutely no quick fix to this. And there's a lot of passion, a lot of emotion. But at the end of the day, guess what? It's our community. We have to make a conscious decision of where you want to live and how do you want to live. And personally for me, I ran because I did not want to raise my daughter in a community where guns and violence was every day accepted. And I think everybody in this room is here because you want to be a part of the change. Now, we're not going to be a part of the change if we don't respect each other, we don't listen to each other, and we most of all don't work together. I'm only one part of the puzzle, one part of the equation, but I'm going to do my part. We're going to do our part. And we're going to partner with everybody up here to be a part of that change. Been there 3 days. I now know where the bathroom is. It's going to take me a little while, but we're going to work, and we will make that change. But we have to do it together. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to take this enthusiasm, and I want to understand. When we start putting the children, some of your kids away in jail, you're going to be angry. And I want you to remember the same hurt and pain that mother felt when you sit there and complain about the arrest. Because that mother is crying out because she's hurt and pain. It's accountability, and that's starting right now, right here with everybody on this stage. Thank you so much, and God bless, and get home safe.
Tell them right now before they go that we're taking all the questions back to the office.
Also, we'll make sure we take all the questions back to the office, and we'll make sure we continue to look at them.
If anyone's interested in this, it is live streamed, so if you did not record it, and if everyone would just stop where you are and bow your heads so we can pray out. Stop a moment. Let us pray out as we go our traveling ways.
Would you please just stand where you are? Would you please?
Stand where you are so we can say prayer and get out of here.
Yeah, just stand where you are, okay? I'm grateful for your presence. I'm grateful for your behavior. I'm grateful for the respect that we've shown each other as a community. I need to say this to you, the restrooms are to your left. The gates are open on both ends. It would be helpful if we could get somebody from the police department to help us get out on Belvedere, stop the traffic so we could get out on Belvedere. Ramblewood, both ways. You decide which way you're going, all right? And again, we want to bow. We enter with prayer. We've had a good, not only fellowship, but informative gathering, respectful. If it was some ugly stuff, it would be on the news in big time. But this was very orderly. It's the first of its kind that I know about. Let's bow together and pray that we can leave here safely and arrive safely. Father, we thank you. It's our privilege just to call you Father. We thank you for your presence in our midst. We thank you for this gathering. We pray now that everything we have said and done will be pleasing to you and effective for your people. Bless us as we depart this place. Let us journey in safety. Let us arrive safely and find our loved ones, our homes, blessed and kept by you. Rest us tonight and raise us in the morning that we might go forth committed to doing the right thing toward one another and the right thing before you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Go in his peace.